Hi everyone, good afternoon. So here I am again talking about a not very technical topic, but I hope I will entertain you. And the topic is sociotechnical architecture. This is a topic I'm very passionate about, and I really think it's extremely important for us to think about sociotechnically about when we build up our products, our organization, etc. So today I'm going to give you a sort of an introduction to this topic, and I will also try to give you some pointers on how can you start doing that. And all of these things will sound a bit logical, but and sort of obvious. But the fact is that as an industry we don't do this enough. So I hope I inspire you to do this more explicitly. To start talking about this, I'm going to use a theme I like a lot, which are restaurants. So restaurants are rather interesting sociotechnical systems. You basically have a customer that you want to basically give value that comes to your restaurant to get some food or get some experience. And then you as owner and designer of the restaurant, what you normally want to do is to optimize the value that you exchange with the customer. So you want the customer to come back, you want them to have a good experience, you want to do all of that. And in order for you to do that, you need to think about a lot of variables inside the restaurant. The food you serve, but also the people, the crew that you have to actually get that done. So I would like to talk about sociotechnical thinking. I would like to guide you through a few traits that you need to consider if you want to set up a successful restaurant. By the way, this is not don't follow these recommendations blindly if you are opening a restaurant, because I don't know much about restaurants, but these are traits that are interesting to consider when you think about sociotechnical systems. And I mentioned here success. So success can mean many different things, but when you start this exercise, this design exercise, you need to understand where do you want to go. So what do you see as success? And it can be different things for your restaurant. So without further ado, let me go into these traits. So trait number one I would like to tell you about is the fact that your staff defines your cooking and experiences. So whatever mission you set up, you need to bring into your team people that are capable of implementing that. So for example, if you want to create an amazing French food and drink experience restaurant, you better get chefs that know about French food, people that know about French wine, and they will need to basically work together also to combine these different elements in order to provide a very nice value and very good value to the customer coming in for this experience. Then trait number two is really about the fact that chefs cannot be cooking, serving the tables, doing all sorts of things at the same time. So when you are setting up your restaurant, you need to understand that you need to have enough people, capacity to deliver the service and the product that you want to be served without burning out your people. Otherwise, they will probably leave. And what you should strive for is to have a team that can be healthy and for a long time. That's normally how we try to set up teams. They will learn, they will improve over time, and you need to create conditions for them to do that. Trait three is really about the fact that a restaurant and any product is a sum of many value streams. You have these streams of values that you have the dish that comes from the kitchen, you have the wine, you have the serving. All of them are streams that sort of run in parallel, and you want them to be sort of independent of each other in a certain way. But at the end, when you are providing your end product to your customer, you want to have a very harmonious experience for the customer. So it needs to come together at the end. So you need to make sure that the wine goes well with the dish that you are serving and that sort of thing. Trait number 4 is really about not you as a restaurant owner, not handing recipes to your chefs. You need to empower your chefs, your crew, to experiment with the dishes, with the combinations of things that will make your customer to come back for another time, to experience this again, maybe to experience a new dish because you are continuously innovating in your dishes, or you have new things inside. And for this, you need to enable your team to actually be able to play with that. They need to have the capacity to do this sort of experiments. Trait number 5, and the last one on my list, is the fact that because the #1 restaurant in the world did good using a certain model, a certain design, it doesn't mean that this will work for you, because you will have a specific context. Maybe you are on a given city that has certain products around it, or you have certain limitations on your location, and you shouldn't copy paste these models that work. You should try to actually understand your specific problem and your specific context, and from there design your own restaurant. So if you look into all of these 5 interesting traits that I sort of cherry picked, but there can be many more, but these 5 traits are very much focused on people and organization. How do you also look into holistically, how do you design your system, considering the people, but also the dishes that you want to create and all of that. And this is what people are calling sociotechnical thinking, or in our world of software, sociotechnical architecture. Among them, there is here Nick Thune. He's a very active promoter of this way of thinking, about more holistically look at how do we design our architectures. And I will be talking about multiple resources from Nick as we move through the presentation. And so if you are interested on this, definitely this is a person to take a look on his resources. Let's just stay here for a second, and just so we set like a basic definition of socio-technical architecture. And to tell you the truth, I didn't find one, so I came up with this one myself. And it's really, in general, socio-technical architecture is about taking a holistic co-design approach to technical and organizational systems, given that they have an inherent impact on each other. Nick Thune, which I mentioned on the previous slide, uses also this sort of wording, which is when you are architecting software systems, we must consider the impact it has on the teams and in the organization, and vice versa. So they will always have impact on each other. So we need to have a more holistic design approach to see how can we create a balance between these two types of systems. And why is this important? This is this is a visualization of a sort of socio-technical evolution, a loop. And what we have here is, in general, when we build software products, we want to build them because there is a customer to whom we provide value, and whom provides us some pays us for this product or this service. So we have the software of the system of software providing that service, that value to the customer paying us back. However, in this picture, we have a very important system up here with the system of work, which are the teams that basically listen to the customer, the expectations, the observations they have from the customer using the product. And they are the ones building and evolving the product continuously. So what we should strive for is to create a co-design here that enables the teams to listen and quickly act and deliver new value to customers. So we want to go through this loop rather quickly. And this is not just a logical thing that I'm telling here. This is actually outcome of research made in this book, empirical research that shows that high-performing technical organizations are normally organizations that have a very short lead time from observing something to actually building it up on the products. And furthermore, among other metrics, also the teams can iterate quickly on these and release new features, new value to customer very quickly. So these are two of the four metrics that this book recommends. So with that, we really my goal of today is really to bring you the sort of this, to be sensitive that we should stop to over focusing on just the software architecture, and we need to consider the teams that are around that are building this software architecture, but especially they are listening to the customers and bringing the sort of what the customer is looking for or would pay for to the product. And we want to iterate here quickly. So we need to make sure that there is a good balance between these two systems, the technical and the system of people or the organization. So now I actually want to walk you through the traits that I shared to set up a successful restaurant, but now applying to our world of building software and the teams around it. I will also provide you a sort of an overview of some principles and strategies that you can use to address these traits on while building your products or teams that build the products. So the trait number one, it's really so your staff defines your cooking. This is nothing more than Conway's law. So I think a lot of you probably heard about this law. Melvin Conway wrote it a few decades back. And basically, in a nutshell, what it says is that the software systems you have on your landscape, they follow the organization systems architecture that you have. So if you, for example, if you organize your teams around functional silos, front-end, back-end, database, whatever, on the long run, as the teams work, they tend to create an architecture that reflects their organizational structure. So they will have maybe a some front-end components that link into an API. This API probably links to a database maintained by DBAs, and what we want to iterate quickly to provide value to the customer. And the customer is not worried how this looks inside. And having multiple teams, we know that this increases the complexity on the communication between the people to deliver new features. And if we don't pay attention to Conway's law, and so if we don't take that part into consideration, we come into this dangerous zone, which is HR as designer of our organization, in many cases, they end up being the architects of our software systems, because Conway's law is sort of unavoidable. So in the long run, the software systems will reflect that organizational structure. So I don't think we should make our HR colleagues accountable for our software architecture. So we really need to bring that to the table. And how can we do that? So basically, we want to design an organization that mirrors the sort of our desired system architecture. So an architecture that enables us to accomplish our business goal, maybe enable high velocity on releasing new functionality to the customer, etc. So we can go there by applying for example, this method that James Lewis coined as inverse Conway's law maneuver. So you think about the desired architecture, and then you think about what sort of organizational team arrangement do you need to make it happen. So, for example, on the previous case, you want this product or this feature to be released to the customer very quickly. It's not that complex. it has some front end and back end needs, some database. So you create a team that is capable of doing that. So the whole team sits together and can build that. Going to trade two. Trade two was about the overloading the chefs on cooking, serving, doing the dishes. And this is what this book called Team Topologies calls team cognitive load. So this is a problem that relates with the capacity of the team fitting the products that they own on their head, in a sense. So when we are setting up a team and a team owning a new application or building a product, we need to verify if the team is capable of owning it. Do they have enough cognitive load to own it? And let's just look into what cognitive load means. Their cognitive load has basically these three dimensions. It has the intrinsic dimension, and this is about skills. So think like the team needs to know certain programming languages to implement the product. You have extraneous cognitive load, and these are mechanics that are required to make your product live. Say, for example, how do we bring our product to production? How do we deploy it? And then you have germane cognitive load. And germane cognitive load is really about the business focus, the logic, business logic. So, for example, how does the shop work? So when we are thinking about is the team capable of owning this application or not, we want to enable the team to basically have maximized the capability of handling the problems on the domain. And we can organize our organization to try to simplify, for example, the technology stack that the team has. Also, the way provide a good platform so that they don't spend a lot of effort on deploying their applications. Then they have a lot of more capacity to actually think and iterate quickly on that loop on releasing new value to customer. And in order to do this, Team Topologies created this approach called Team First. So the design space that you consider when you are setting up your teams and your architecture is not just target architecture that you have, but you, again, consider the team that needs to own it. And you need to ask yourself the question, is this team capable at this moment of owning this application? Do they have enough cognitive load available? If the answer is no, then we should, and we don't do anything, the team will fail. The team will just get stuck and not be able to iterate and build their application. So we may need to play on simplifying the cognitive load they have on extraneous or on the intrinsic dimensions in order for them to be able to handle the new application. Or maybe we need to have a new team. So this is the sort of discussion you have. But you don't go and build and throw something to a team if they are not capable of handling it. The third dimension is a bit related also with the team owning things. And it has to do with the fact that the product is a combination of parts. But we know from experience that teams cannot have an infinite number of people. It's just not effective. And this is not just what I have seen throughout my career, but it's based also on research. So research also referred on this book, Team Topologies, also called the Dunbar's number, states that like a single team, a unit, a team, can have like up to 5 to 8 people to operate into with a close personal relationship. So they can work very closely with each other. This is the sort of number that you can have. However, sometimes we have products that are a bit more complicated. So you may, for example, have like 3 small teams working slightly on complementary parts and still experiencing a sort of a deep trust on each other. They also have this sort of key number, which is 50 people. And this is sort of the limit they state as, here is the limit of mutual trust that people can have. When you go above that, it's just very difficult for people to know each other, to be able to work effectively with each other. So with this, you can start thinking about team boundaries, and team topologies provides two very interesting resources to have this conversation about team boundaries and interactions. Namely, they provide this sort of 4 fundamental topologies for teams. So what sort of teams can we have or should we have on our organization? And the first one is called the stream-aligned teams. And stream-aligned teams are the teams that own a certain value stream to the customer. So we want them to be aligned with that value stream, and we want them to be able to quickly iterate over this value stream. The other teams that exist here that they provide us as basic teams, they mostly exist to help stream-aligned teams to operate at their best. Enabling teams don't own any product. They just work on making sure that stream-aligned teams can acquire new, for example, be able to work on a new technology, improve their way of working, that sort of thing. Complicated subsystem teams are teams that take out of the stream-aligned teams a complicated piece of system that sort of blocks their high velocity. They take it out, they make it a separate block on the landscape, and then they can provide this as a service to this stream-aligned team or maybe to multiple stream-aligned teams. And then the last one is the platform team. And the platform team is really about creating all the conditions for the teams to minimize their extraneous cognitive load. So they should just be able to deploy quickly their application. They don't need to know all the details about Kubernetes. Not all the teams should need to know that. They should be focused more or enabled more to think about the problems that the product have. Then they propose, okay, now these are the 4 types of teams, so how can they interact with each other? And they have these 3 basic modes. One is the facilitating, so this is like enabling teams, facilitating the learning of a new skill, or for example, helping these teams on being able to do SRE by themselves. You have the X as a service, so this complicated subsystem was extracted and now it's provided as a service to stream-aligned teams. And then the last is called collaboration. And sometimes there is a stream-aligned team that is working on a new technology, and maybe they need platform team to start supporting them on abstracting the support to that technology to the platform. So they collaborate for a while, and then eventually this is absorbed by platform team. However, if you look sort of these elements, they just talk about types of teams and how could they interact optimally. They don't talk about how do you discover the boundaries, so team topologies don't provide good resources to do that. And they sort of refer to a domain-driven design to do this part. Domain-driven design is filled with techniques to discover what are the logical components that you have on your landscape and how should they relate with each other. So these 2 books and these 2 resources are very essential to think about socio-technical systems. Going to trait 4. So trait 4 was about not handling recipes to your chefs, allow them to discover new recipes, etc. And this really is about the fact that we need to enable our teams to continuously discover new opportunities. And this, again, sounds logical, and this is backed by research, namely this research mentioned here, which shows that the top the team brainstorming is one of the top sources of best ideas for products and features in the product. So this is the team owning the product, being able to experiment and sort of bottom up on an emergent fashion, learn what are the new features that we should build. And you can look into here, for example, executive order or CEO vision. It comes much down on this research. And so this is really like a a call out to let's enable our teams to be able to have capacity to be able to do that. So cognitive load available for the team to do that. This also doesn't mean that they will be working on isolation. So they will still, there must be some overarching strategies or top-down, because we will most likely have multiple teams in the organization, and we want to optimize the combination of the value that they bring to the customer. And for that, you need to have more also top-down thinking. But the point here is let's create space for the teams to own also the discovery of new features on their products or new products. And how can we do that? There are multiple ways, but there are also this method called dual track agile, which focuses on making sure that the teams have capacity to do their work, their normal work that we see most of the teams doing today, which is delivering new features, but also have the knowledge, for example, product thinking, experimentation, data analysis in place to actually be able to also in parallel do small experiments and discover new features by themselves, not just something that someone else thought about. So this should exist within the team. Okay, so this is the last trait, bear with me. And the last trait focuses on the copying of models that work. So don't copy the model of the #1 restaurant in the world just because they are doing good. You need to try to understand your organization's context. There will be things that are very particular to your organization, to your product team, etc. And this is what we have been seeing people doing with the Spotify model. So people are really over-copied the Spotify model, a snapshot of the Spotify model, actually. And like Kent Beck says, Spotify didn't copy this from anyone else. So they just created this because they had particular challenges within their organization. So they come up with this model of working. So how can we go about this? Well, we can go many ways, but one of the ways that I think it's very essential for us to consider is to stop just working on this analogy way of thinking. It's very prevalent on our world. Because we see something working, we'll just copy and use it. And we should go into more first principles thinking approach. So we find our own problems, we clarify, we break them down, we understand what's going on with our teams, with our legacy systems, with our goals, and then from there we develop solutions to move forward on this. This should be our approach to sociotechnical problems. We need to understand how the different parts work and how can we make sure that we can make them work even better. And also, a fact is that these organizations are continuously changing. So this is why it's very dangerous to copy-paste Spotify's snapshot model, because a few months after that, they were already in a new model, and people continue just applying the static model. So we need to embrace that our operating model is we are continuously observing new issues or smells that we need to address, and we should just create ways to address them and release new versions of our operating model. I call this continuous change, continuous improvement cycle. And this is a bit like, imagine you upgrade your application every 3 years. So think just of the amount of problems that you will have. That's why we are also, when building software, we try to iterate on small steps, because that's just much easier to improve our application. Cool. So this was sort of a quick run through all of these challenges and motivation for thinking more in terms of socio-technical thinking when looking at your architecture. You need to look at all of these different systems on a more holistic approach. And now I wanted to, just before going on to the Q&A, I wanted to give you some sort of idea of how could you start doing this. And to tell you the truth, I couldn't find like a single recipe to do this. And I think the reason is just because this is a mix of many different disciplines and resources, and it's rather complex. So what I will try to give you some sort of ideas of things that I saw working well, and the communities that are trying to bring some of these ideas together to provide like a more systematic way to approach socio-technical architecture. Nevertheless, what I see sort of, I see these 4 big phases of in this process. So I think in order for you to start addressing this, you need to have some sort of alignment with what's the business goal that we have, where do we want to go? Otherwise, you just can't design. So you need to have clarity of more or less where do you want to go. You also need to understand if you are building a new product or reorganizing your organization, you need to understand what's there or what are you trying to go for. So you need to start creating this shared understanding and of where are we now. And then with that shared understanding and goals, you can go into, say, a more strategic architecture phase, which focuses on identifying what are the parts that you have that can sort of move independent of each other at their own speed, have teams allocated to them, and how do they relate with each other? Because we always strive for very loosely coupled architectures, but there will always be some dependencies. So we need to just point them out. Once you have that, you can go into this phase of that is more like think strategically, how will you invest to build this up? So you need to maybe set up new teams, maybe increase the existing teams or capacity to work on more complex things. So you will end up on prioritizing where do you want to invest now, and based on that, you do sort of the organizational design aspect. And sometimes you need to go back and forth here because maybe the budget that you have just is not possible to realize the architecture that you envisioned. So you may need to make some compromises. But eventually you will enable the teams owning each of these parts to basically focus and own that part to iterate on it. And this is sort of this phase 4. So this is sort of a summary of these 4 phases. I will share the presentation afterwards, so you can also read what each of these phases focuses on. And yeah, this is not a 1, 2, 3, 4 all the time. Sometimes you will have different iterations throughout these phases, or maybe start on phase 3 to do some think about strategically how do you want to progress on a given part of your domain. For socio-technical discussions, I think these 2 phases are very interesting and very important. So you are really thinking about the sort of the target architecture you think would enable you to realize your goals, and then you are thinking what organization design can satisfy that. And sometimes you need to go back and forth to make sure that you are balanced. For example, teams have enough cognitive load to handle this architecture. And now, before I conclude, I wanted to just give you some pointers of this is like weeks old material that came out of the domain-driven design community, and they tried to provide some sort of guidelines of typical flows that they see working on the industry on different projects. And if you see, it's really about starts with understanding the business, discovering the domain, decomposing, and then understanding how do they connect these different parts, or in domain-driven design, they call these parts bounded contexts. And then it's about strategizing and setting up the teams, and eventually it's more about the tactical side. So how do we implement a certain part of the landscape? So this is a mix of many different elements, from dim topologies that I mentioned a few times, worldly maps, which is like a technique to see how things evolve in time and what's their maturity, but also product thinking. So how can we empower teams to own their product and more iterate over it with the customer input? So this is definitely, I think it's a great start to start getting more familiar with the socio-technical architecture design. So let's look into one example per phase. On phase one, you have it's about aligning and understanding the domain. So what's our business goal? But let's understand how our domain is set up. And here you have a technique by Alberto Brandolini called event storming, and probably many of you heard about it. And this is really a technique that aims at bringing into a room with an empty wall people from business, design, developers, users, whoever has knowledge about the domain. And with stickies, they will map flows of the activities and how the domain works. And this is the goal here, is to create a big picture shared understanding of the domain. So the different people will bring different perspectives, and these are sticky, these are not technical diagrams. So everyone can just start participating. And many times what you see on these sessions is that business background people have a certain view and technical have another one, and they tend to align here. And this is what we need to actually go into the second step, which is more about strategic architecture. So after that exercise, you start seeing sort of what are the components and parts that we have on our architecture. So you will have these are just parts, and on domain-driven design, they are called bounded contexts. And here you can start creating a map of how do they relate with each other using this context map patterns. So for example, you can see that scoring will conform always to the model that rating model provides. So they will just blindly follow whatever changes they do. This may be useful here, but maybe it's not so useful in many other situations. But with this language, you can start defining how do these parts interact with each other. Once you have this picture, then you can go into the strategy part, and the organizational setup that will own that architecture. And here, you really can make a huge benefit from this core domain chart by Nicktoon, which basically plots all of these different parts into a complexity versus a business differentiation axis. So what you will have is, for example, you can plot all of them and clearly plot that A is going to be our big bet for upcoming half year. And that means that this is bringing us a huge business differentiation. It's rather complex, but it also will probably be difficult to copy by competition. So this is a big bet we make for the next half year, while you see things that are rather generic. And this is probably like out-of-the-box elements from Google Cloud or platform, very stable components that you don't need to have teams working there continuously. So what this allows you to have is to have, again, a conversation, or where do you want to invest? Where do you want to put most of your team effort, for example? And you can also do sort of other things with this map, like mapping what are the relationships between the dependencies between these different parts. For example, here A and C work very in collaboration for a long time, so maybe they are candidate to be a single team, and that sort of conversation. Once you get this more clear, you can go into the fourth part, which is about let's get this implemented, owned by a team. And here, what you end up doing is you can use this resource called Bounded Context Canvas. And this is like a one page where you write down what this bounded context, or could be a microservice, does, what's sort of the logic that is inside, what language is here. So what do we mean by a user within our context? And then what sort of relations do we have with other bounded contexts, with other parts of the landscape? So this is a one page that will allow you to, for example, if you have someone new on your team and looks here, they should get a very quick picture of what does this service or this application does. And that was it. Sorry to throw you a lot of resources, but my goal was really to get you motivated to think about this, because this is rather relevant. If you want to learn more about this, these are 4 books that you could really learn a lot about to sort of go further on socio-technical thinking. Yeah, I have 5 minutes left. I will publish my presentation on this link, and we can also chat afterwards if I don't address all the questions. But Deepank, I'm okay now to take questions.
Thank you, Eduardo. Wow, yeah. Great presentation. Let's look in the Q&A. I see a few questions which are related, and most of the questions you touched upon a bit, but maybe you want to elaborate. We are doing currently product organization, reorganization. What do you think about it? Where we can do better?
Yeah. So I think basically with the product reorganization, we are sort of implementing this, a lot of these ideas. So we started sort of following the patterns I had here on. I'm trying to get there. Sort of what we did was basically we had a new goal, which is to become a retail tech platform. So this was our goal. We started to understand what are the domains we have, and we started to basically design what would be a reasonable strategic architecture. And we are now matching that with the teams that we can have. So definitely, I think we are on the right path to sort of follow this, design our new organization, thinking about the systems that we have, but also the people that we need to basically maintain it and iterate on it very quickly. So I think we are on the right path.
Great. Next question is from Luke. He really liked your idea about that the software architecture is a result of HR decisions. He's asking, are you actively sharing it with people and department?
Oh, I'm not. Yeah, I hope people and the department were also here. But this is just this is just a fact. It is well known, and I think within our company we have been actually paying attention to this detail that people are the architecture are a reflection of the people that are there. So I think we are addressing that point that Luke mentions, definitely.
Okay. Next is from Tekel. Companies evolve, architectures evolve. How do we keep them in sync?
Yeah, so that's what I was trying to mention with in one of the traits that in my vision we need to continuously address smells that are evolving on the company. So issues that are popping up, and we need to address them and not have like every 5 years we do a big bang transformation. So that's my view. So I think the evolution of the organization and architecture needs to be continuous, and for that we need just to empower our teams to be able to do that and have the right structures to enable that. But I fully agree with Techel. This is they are organic. So it's like what I mentioned about Spotify. People copy that model, but that model was a snapshot, and a few weeks later, that model was outdated. So people were copying this model. So this is dangerous. Yeah,
makes sense. The next question is, what do you think about the division between IT and business at Bowl.com?
Yeah. So maybe you should look my talk from last year. I talked exactly about that topic, and in my view, we were rather separated. And over this last year, we did a lot of efforts to bring product or business and IT or tech into the same teams. So these are what we are calling now product teams. So I think we are taking the right steps. So I think we are going on the right direction on that aspect.
Okay. Thanks again, Eduardo, for a very insightful and clear presentation.